you see mental health in the Bible, and you see mental illness in the Bible, and you see God really calling it out and making it very apparent. There has been a stigma surrounding mental illness oftentimes. I have been in a church that has said, you only make sense of mental health the perspective of you pray and it goes away and you're okay. And oftentimes that didn't work out very well.
Cookie cutter approaches don't work. You have to look at the individual person and what they need, and not necessarily just assume that everybody is going to adjust to what you're providing. You tend to exclude based on what you don't understand.
What's up, guys? What's up? Hey everyone, thanks for joining the Resilient Purpose podcast. Today we hope that you enjoy this episode.
We need you to hit the like and subscribe button in 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Everybody did it!
Smash that like button.
Today I have a special guest, Ebony Gammon. She is a master social work and is also currently in her PhD program for higher administration at Liberty University. And today we're going to have a great conversation that covers several different areas, but religion and mental health, the importance of an interesting topic of fasting and prayer in helping our mental health. But then we also dive into the wellness of college students and being able to be preventative with our college students and their mental health. And we also talk a little bit about her book, The Titus Wife, and how the use of prayer and fasting can benefit our wellness. And so it's a great conversation. I hope you guys enjoy it, and let's get to it.
I am an executive assistant for a dean. And of course, in my free time, I write, and that's how I found the podcast. I wrote my first book, The Titus Wife, and so that's really, the bulk of what I am and who I do. I have several years of experience in behavioral health and as being a mental health clinician. And so that really is what struck and piqued my interest in the Resilient Purpose podcast. My degree is in social work, and my master's degree is in social work, and my bachelor's degree is in psychology. And originally I thought I was going to be a therapist, and that was what I was going to do. And that was, I came to realize I really like working on problems that have a farther reach. When you're working with someone individually, you get the ins and outs and all the intricacies of what their issues are. And that certainly is important. And there is absolutely a very gifted group of people that are able to work with individuals on a one-on-one basis. But I really felt God calling me to look beyond, and see how I could help with, just helping people to have balance and achieve balance from a broader perspective and a bigger scale. And so that's really how I got to writing the book. Once we have the opportunity to learn things about ourselves, acquire a degree, we really look at the world through a different lens. And that was really transformational for me. And so that's what really, allowed me to segue into the education arena and work from a place of support so that students and faculty members, they feel very supported in what they do and in their endeavors. And that oftentimes really helps people to achieve a sense of balance. And so that's really, where my passions are running professionally, other than writing.
How did it change your view? You said that college or education kind of transformed your view. In what ways did you see that for yourself?
And in some ways, a first-generation college student. My mother has an associate's degree, but she didn't have a 4-year degree. And I grew up poor in Roanoke, Virginia, and the school system there, the superintendent there was a visionary man. And he had a vision to create a scholarship program for academically adept students, but socioeconomically challenged students. And I was one of those individuals. Acquiring a 4-year college degree allowed me the opportunity to look at different things that I wanted to do with my life that I didn't feel like, I didn't even have the perception that I would be able to do those things. And that's how I got my degree, my bachelor's degree in psychology. But that was transformative for me because it changed my perspective on what I was capable of doing. And I think that that is really important and very useful for people to be able to see.
Your world got bigger, right?
Absolutely.
Like, so you weren't probably exposed to much growing up, and then all of a sudden a whole new world opened up, and then there's opportunity there. And sometimes when we're stuck in our own kind of world, we don't realize that there's opportunity out there. We just gotta be exposed and have that opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was, that really began my love affair with education. That was the first place where I really thought seriously about becoming a therapist. What does it look like? How do you work with individuals that struggle with mental illness and addiction? And my love for psychology traversed over into social work. And that's really where I had the opportunity to broaden my perspective again about what it means to work on, bigger issues and institutional goals and things like that help a broader range of people. And that's how I got to education, because with a social work degree, you can certainly be a therapist. You can certainly work on policies and, laws and things of that sort. But what I guess taking from my own personal experience, higher education was just really something that changed me, changed my my perspective of myself. And I wanted to be able to continue to help students have that opportunity in a supported way. And so that's how I, really use my skills and everything that I've learned to continue to help people, and be resilient individuals who meet their goals and, achieve the things that they set out for themselves.
So if you reflect back to growing up, it seems like you kind of, when you went into college and you had that opportunity, that you found this passion pretty quickly to help others or to go into the psychology, social work field. Out of all the possible majors you could have gone into, you chose that field. Is there a specific experience or something that drove that passion or direction for your life? This idea of helping others, being in, transforming lives in the education field, all that type of stuff.
I had several family members who struggled with substance abuse. Mm-hmm. And just growing up as a child and seeing many of the challenges that they faced, it made me want to better understand what's happening in the brain. Why is it that people who experience traumas oftentimes resort to self-destructive behaviors or resort to addictive behaviors? What does that look like, and why does that occur? And so that was really what piqued my interest in psychology. Like you said, it opened me up to see that it's so much more than what I walked into it thinking that it was. That degree gave me the confidence to work in behavioral health as a mental health clinician and work directly with individuals that struggle with serious mental illness every day. And it helped me to see, how trauma oftentimes leads to things that are just very difficult for people to handle, and how oftentimes substance abuse can be a coping mechanism. And so that probably played the greatest role in me choosing the psychology route and then working with those individuals professionally.
Did it help you look at your family members in a different way or see them? Did it change in any perspective or did it impact the way you interacted with family members related to addiction and mental illness?
It changed my expectations because although my family members, by the time I got to college and I graduated and I had a degree, they were no longer struggling day to day with substance abuse. It's allowed me to really see that period of time in their life solidify many of the ways that they think and many of the things that they do. And I saw that when I worked with my clients as well. And so I adjusted my expectations based on understanding that this is a part of who they are. They may never change this thing that I think they should, or they may never change this perspective that I think, may be negative or self-defeating, but I should not expect them to. I should support them in that place that they're in. And that, I think, has really helped my relationships with my family members that have struggled with substance abuse. And I really feel like it has helped me not to carry such a weight when people don't live up to your expectations. You have to be the person responsible for adjusting them to reflect what is, what the nature of the relationship is going to be, and so that was really eye-opening for me.
Right. And so you focused probably in the beginning on, I want you to see the world through my eyes, and that you kept hitting walls with that, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
And then the education kind of allowed you to go, they can't really see it through my eyes. We have different experiences.
And I would say working with my clients, so I was in Virginia, we have what's called outpatient services, similar to what you all have in Ohio. And we would work with clients who had a hospitalization at some point in their life on a weekly basis. And so I would meet with my clients, and they had a variety of diagnoses, all of them severely severe in nature, and working with them daily and being a part of their lives as they were really struggling with adjusting to, having a stable life, having the responsibilities of, just paying your bills and maintaining sobriety and things of that sort. It really helped me to see how challenging mental illness can be to people who are in the crux of it at that moment. And really the necessity of them having a very dependable support system became very apparent to me. And I really have taken those experiences with me in every other avenue of my life. And I really hold them very dearly because I feel like they help me to be more compassionate, have a greater depth of patience. And like I said, really always keep my expectations of people in check, Yeah. So that was a really rewarding experience for me.
Yeah. Did you find that, like, when you didn't keep your expectations in check, that you took things pretty personally, or kind of put too much pressure on yourself to be, to make some type of change?
Absolutely. When you don't align your expectations with where a person is, you end up being the one frustrated. You end up being the one defeated. You end up being the one that is disappointed, And so that's the dynamic of relationships. And you can take that dynamic into any field and into any relationship. You really and truly have to meet people where they are. And so is something that I talk a lot about in the book, The Tightest Wife, being able to take care of yourself so that you are able to meet people and to meet your family members, your children, your husband, others around you where they are. If you're not caring for yourself, it's hard for you to be able to see people through an accurate lens. And it's also hard for you to help them when they do need help.
But that's hard. People don't like to take care of themselves. They feel better helping others, but taking care of the self-care is something that I think is huge in just about any field, and is becoming such a big topic because of how people are not taking care of themselves. There's just stress everywhere, and then we're expected to kind of help others, but then how do we take care of ourselves and do that? I always kind of refer back to that airplane metaphor where, the oxygen masks drop, you put yours on first, and then you put the one on others. But how do you talk about that in your book? Do you discuss kind of how to make self-care a priority? Because I think sometimes there's this idea that I can't make self-care too much of a priority because then I'm neglecting everybody else.
I do. My book is really centered around the tenets of prayer and fasting. I talk about, in the section on stewardship, and stewarding your home, the importance of caring for your mind, your body, your soul. And I tie those directly to scripture, because that's really, the foundation of what the book is about. I really explain it from the perspective, just like you said, you cannot meet the needs of anyone else in your life. You cannot meet the needs of yourself. You can't take care of yourself if you're not practicing self-care, if you are not being intentional with, how you handle disappointments, how you handle the health of your body, how you handle the stress of your mind. If you are not intentional in those things, and one of the methods that you can certainly use to be intentional is prayer and fasting, you will see significant deficits in your family. You'll see significant disconnects, and those things can be really challenging and just produce more stress. So it is really important to take care of yourself.
You mentioned fasting, which I think is intriguing to me. We can come back to the prayer, but I wanted to kind of jump on the fasting part. How does fasting integrate into self-care? And because most people probably only see fasting in the terms of weight loss or, that type of thing. But I would imagine that you're talking about fasting from a different perspective.
I am. So my book is written from the biblical perspective. And so when I'm talking specifically about prayer and fasting, it is from the biblical perspective. And the beauty that you find from the Bible in fasting is that it brings you closer to God. It helps you have a place of clarity that normally, all of the things of the world, all of the challenges that you're experiencing are really clouding you. And so taking that time, fasting really begins with setting aside a very specific amount of time and being very intentional. So that goes back to being intentional, and really honing in on what's challenging you. What's pressing you on every side, what is hindering you from feeling your best. And really taking that to God in a fast and saying, Lord, I'm just going to turn my plate down for this period of time. And I'm going to pray and I'm going to seek you and I'm going to bring your word back to you. And I know that you are going to give me some clarity about these things. And that may show up in another person. That may show up in a book that you read. That may show up in just a feeling of peace. But fasting in the Bible has really been it's talked about so frequently as one of the things that really draws you closer to God. Jesus fasted, Esther fasted, all of these people in the Bible, and they are just very descriptive and highly detailed stories of what happened when people fasted. And so even from a perspective that isn't biblical, people talk about how, fasting really centers them. And so I talk about that in the book from the biblical perspective. So
what I'm hearing also outside of kind of being closer to God is that the fasting is about trying to be more present and more conscious. So getting yourself out of autopilot and being reflective.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what is it? What's the connection between the fasting and being present and self-reflective?
I think you summed it up so well, Doug, that even if you're not using fasting from a religious perspective, being in tune with your body, being in tune with your mind, being in tune with the things that are challenging you, because oftentimes those are the things that we are not facing. We're not being honest with ourselves about what is really bothering us, what is really challenging us, what is really being a trigger to depressive symptoms. Being able to establish new habits, like you said, break the autopilot and establish a different start to your day, a different way that you navigate food. It really can help you center yourself and be present and regain a sense of control too. Because oftentimes, we eat because we are just overwhelmed with things. And that can go either way. You can eat or not eat. But I really feel like being intentional about fasting brings your mind back to a place of serenity.
So there is a food connection to this that you guys are, yeah. And more, and I was thinking, before, I didn't say it yet, but I was thinking like, is food seen as maybe a distraction to being present? So you can get yourself lost in the food they eat, go out to eat, kind of just not kind of as an avoidance of what we're dealing with that's stressing us or bothering us. Yeah. We avoid it through the use of food or substances or whatever. So by fasting, we're trying to create an experience where we're not avoiding.
Yes, absolutely. And you are being direct. In fasting, you're being very direct. And food is a distractor, just like you said. It keeps us oftentimes from, that really even can go into the healthiness of the food. Oftentimes we eat sugar-laden things, we eat carb-laden things, and there's research and science about how all of those things can cloud, you can get brain fog from sugar, things of that sort. And so it's just a way to self-medicate and to numb. And to not be present with the things that are challenging you. And so, so regardless of if you're doing it for a spiritual reason and it brings you closer to the Lord, or you're doing it just for the natural reason of being in tune with your body and mind, it's very helpful in breaking some of the destructive cycles that we have and in resetting your mind to be intentional about caring for yourself.
In terms of fasting, you pick a certain amount of time to fast, which I would assume is not like an hour. It's like 12 hours, 16 hours, maybe longer, depending on what. Obviously not so long that you starve, but enough to kind of make an impact, Sure. And then there are some intentional things that you would do during that period.
You can, and it just depends on, if you're doing a fast for a spiritual reason, or you're doing a fast just for the purpose of self-care and centering yourself, you can pick an hour. That's the beauty in it, is that if it's an hour and that's where you need to start, that's okay. Right. You can pick half a day. You can pick a whole day. It really is dependent upon you. And that's where you get that locus of control again. You're able to bring back into your sphere of control your ability to say no to something for a while, just so that you can recenter and refocus your mind. In that time that you are fasting, you are very intentional with what you do. You may not, watch TV. You may not get on social media. It may be that you say, I'm going to sit and I'm going to read the scripture and I'm going to meditate on it. You may meditate. You may pray. You may just sit in quiet, and just have time. Those are all very just intentional things that you do with the fast. I think the most important piece of the fast is that you establish why you're doing it. I am fasting in this time because this thing is really challenging me, or I am taking this thing to God because I feel like I can't bear it anymore. And I think that is the most important part of a fast is the purpose in which you're doing it.
Right. And fasting can be even more than just food, right? So like you just said, you could fast your technology, your iPads or whatever to kind of give yourself, because we've seen that can make your brain fog as well, where you get lost in the technology.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's letting the outside influences be quiet so that, what's inside can be loud, can be clear. And that's really important. And whether it's, like I said, if you are pressing into God for something, or if you just need to be centered, I think that they both are very, very important. And it is about kind of shutting out the outside noise.
Is your faith or relationship with God and your assimilation into kind of mental health, was that kind of the foundation, or did that come into play after the education in the mental health or social work field?
I would say yes. I would say my faith. I really wanted to establish a clearer understanding of how mental health, addiction, and faith could be balanced. I really wanted to see that because I saw, mental health and substance abuse issues in my family as a child. And although I I grew up Christian, I really didn't know how they integrated. What did that really look like? And it took me really going to the Bible and reading and studying more to see that there is a significant balance between your faith and mental health and addiction. And you see in the Bible where King Saul, he was tormented in his mind. He called David to play for him, called a harpist to play for him. And so you see mental health in the Bible, and you see mental illness in the Bible, and you see God really calling it out and making it very apparent. So that was really how I was able to see the integration between addiction, mental health, mental illness, and the Christian faith, and come to a place where we can talk openly about how they can coexist. Because I feel like that has been limitation of the Christian faith, is that there has been a stigma surrounding mental illness oftentimes, and there has been a lack of education about mental health. There's something else I go into in the book. Your mind has to be sound, and that can come from your faith as well as other mental health techniques such as therapy, counseling, medications. They can coexist. It doesn't mean that one is more impactful than the other.
We've had conversations about that off air, in terms of religion and how, I wouldn't say religion as a whole, but religious sectors would view mental health. There's often this idea that you can't have both, that if you go seek out mental health care, you are neglecting God, or you're rejecting God or whatever. And there's this kind of dichotomy between, okay, you either do one or the other, you can't do both, which, from my perspective makes no sense, but there is this kind of emphasis. And I don't know kind of if you've had those similar experiences where pastors, preachers talk more about mental health nowadays than they probably did 20, 30 years ago, because it's so prevalent in society. But unfortunately, a lot of times you hear them talking in ways of, all you need is just to come to church and everything will be okay. And not recognizing we can't handle everything. Like, we have to kind of all be a team and address these needs.
Well, here's the reality, is that God doesn't require the church to handle everything. He says that so clearly in his word. And yes, I would absolutely agree with you that, yes, now pastors are doing more with making themselves aware and educated of the differences and the necessity between mental health and mental illness, and really being able to talk to their congregations about both. Because some people don't struggle with mental illness, but everybody needs mental health. Everyone needs to know that their mind is an entity that they have to care for. And God so clearly talks about that in the Bible. And I just really feel that destigmatizing it by making it something where we say, look what God said about it. He didn't say it has to be all or nothing. You can only be, a Christian and not mentally ill, or, if you are a Christian, there's no necessity to practice, good self-care and mental health. Those are the things we really have to work significantly to deconstruct, because they just aren't true. And they aren't even biblically sound. It's things like this. It's things like the Resilient Purpose podcast and the Titus Wife book that help specifically women understand, you have a lot to carry and a lot to juggle. And sometimes, that can be challenging. And if that comes with the trauma, something that has happened in your life that really has challenged you mentally, that may devolve into a mental illness. What do you do with that? You don't just bottle it up and hold on to it, and you don't allow people to shame you.
We even say in our mental health field that, like, cookie cutter approaches don't work, because you have to look at the individual person and what they need, and not necessarily just assume that everybody is going to adjust to what you're providing. So anybody can walk into a church, and doesn't mean that they're all going to experience church in the same way, or God in the same way, or religion. And we have to work, like what you said earlier, with where people are at. And so sometimes it's kind of this idea, I think in many fields, mental health included, where it's like, you have to come into my field and then adjust to what I'm doing. instead of us trying to listen to what the person's experience is and provide what best suits their needs. Being in church with somebody who has real struggles socially might be overwhelming for somebody. So how do we provide that to them without having to go to a big church or go into those different, how can we provide it in a way that's going to be useful or helpful for that particular person, instead of kind of that judgment of if you don't fall in line, then you're bad or you're sinful or whatever. And that's a tough situation, because I think there's probably anxieties just as much as anxieties getting into mental health treatment. There's anxieties about going to church or seeking faith or whatever.
I think I really appreciate that there has been recently this move to integrationism. You can have advocacy and you can have it within the Christian congregation. You can have, denominational bodies that really value what it means to have mental health or to be mentally healthy, make people aware that mental illness is very real. It's very tangible. No one shames people for having heart disease. No one shames someone for having diabetes. And it must really be the same with mental illness, because if we don't have that integration, you have a whole population of people who've been in church and who are Christians, and that's what they identify with, and they're not able to be helped, and their church can really act as a resource. That faith can really act as a resource, but you have to have people who really are equipped, and you have to truly have the integration, between the faith and the mental health support. So
I'm curious as to, because I think part of reducing stigma in anything is education and learning about it, like normalizing those experiences or normalizing mental health, normalizing mental illness, because I would imagine you're very integrated into the faith world, where actually people, like, education about mental health and mental illness is coming to churches to help make them aware. Is that something that they seek out, or are they strictly just trying to make sense of it in terms of the Bible?
I think the benefit of my life is that I've been on both sides. I have been in a church that has said, you only make sense of mental health, the perspective of you pray and it goes away and you're okay. And oftentimes that didn't work out very well. But I've also been a part of a Christian church body that literally had, a mental health and wellness group that ran weekly at the church. And there were lots of different groups that church ran for just different things: substance abuse, adoptive families, women who've miscarried children. So just many of the issues in life, they took a completely different perspective on it. I would have to say that the church body that addressed it head on and out in the open was more successful in having people that stayed engaged in their faith.
Right.
Than people who did not. Important that churches, church bodies, congregations, not just pastors, see the benefit and the necessity of learning about mental illness and integrating mental health into everything they do in the church, because those are really critical pieces of what God calls us to be aware of and to integrate and to work on. I've seen it from both sides, and having seen it from both sides, I honestly think the church that addresses it head on does better with helping their members be, better Christians.
Right. Because I think ultimately, if you don't, then you kind of create an air of not accepting people with, there's a kind of an air of, okay, unless you are this way, you don't belong. And I don't think that's ever anybody's intent. If you don't address it and don't try to understand it, then you tend to exclude based on what you don't understand. We see that in society, and is lack of understanding leads to kind of exclusion and rejection. So you had said something that I thought was interesting, where it's like, the one side that you've experienced where it's like, oh, just pray it away. And that doesn't always work. How do you see prayer fitting in for mental health? Like, what value do you give it, or how does it play a role in our self-care or in our mental health?
I definitely think it varies based on the individual. That's the beauty of each person having their own journey. For me, prayer is just such an integral part. It is a calming, it is a peace. It reminds me of the strength that I have
Can I stop you real quick? You said reminds you of the strength that you have. And in what way do you experience that? Like, how do you recognize the strength that you have through prayer? Because I think that's really helpful to understand of how prayer can recognize strength.
When I pray the scripture. And so hearing that reminds me that these are the things that I'm capable of. I am an overcomer, that, I am the head and not the tail. I am above and not beneath. I am God's righteousness. And because of that, the things that I am struggling with, I have strength to overcome them, or to just be victorious in them. And sometimes it's just those reminders, that you need to really understand that this is not going to take me out, whatever this may be. I've never struggled with mental illness, but I have been challenged in just life, and just being a professional, being a mother, being a wife. And all of those things are overwhelming. They are truly, truly can be overwhelming. And so being able to pray what God's word is and know that that's true for me is what gives me strength to keep going. That's going to look different for somebody else, and that's okay.
Well, so I was just thinking, bridging the gap between faith and non-faith folks, prayer is most like mindfulness kind of activities where you would think about mantras, or maybe reflecting on stories of people who have overcome, like similar themes of that resilient, overcoming adversity, those types of things, hope-based reflection, or reflecting on times where you've met a challenge and overcome it, to kind of remind you, versus where your mind typically drifts towards the negative, where you tend to think about the negative things. Like, you could have a whole day of positive experiences and one negative experience, and your mind focuses on that negative experience, taking a conscious effort to think about positive experiences. But that would be kind of a similar activity in terms of, but one is you're drawing those stories from the Bible and in your relationship with God.
Absolutely. And mindfulness is so important. It is really a critical point for maintaining a place of peace within yourself. And some people see it as a form of prayer, just being mindful in what you eat, going back to fasting, being mindful in what you do and the habits that you have, being mindful in the people that you allow in your space. It helps you to be aware of the things that may trigger that kind of negative recurring mental space. And so, yes, it's sitting and meditating and being quiet. That really is kind of the same, like you said, bridging that gap between the secular and the church. You certainly can utilize those tools to help you, to help you in your walk, and to help you to not feel so overwhelmed by the challenges of life. Even if you're not dealing with a specific mental illness, there are many challenges in our lives every day, in people's jobs, with their families, and just sitting and being present, being mindful in the things that you do, and having mindfulness practices such as grounding and thinking on good thoughts, and continuing to meditate on really good words or really good passages. All of those things are helpful, to your mental health and in promoting mental wellness. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, I would imagine you're slowing yourself down too. I think sometimes we're just moving too fast. Shut down time for a second and just be right now. Kind of coming back to the beginning, is that you working in the education field? Is this something like that, these things that you've learned in the mental health and addiction field and just kind of tenets of your book, is that something that you're integrating into, kind of that education and transforming those lives in that way? Or how are you taking these kind of passions in the current field that you're in?
So I'm currently working on my doctorate degree in higher education administration. I had the experiences that I had in my childhood with seeing how challenging mental illness and substance abuse can be. Being awarded a scholarship, going to college, getting a degree, going back, getting another degree, and working directly with severely mentally ill adults. That has really helped me to see the necessity for, a very strong and robust support system for college students. I started off working in student support services and working directly with students that had many of the challenges that I saw my clients face, myself faced with having family members that were substance abusers. That really ignited a passion in me to continue to grow myself professionally so that I can be in a position where I ensure that those services are paramount and tangible for students. And so that's really my professional endeavor, is to take everything that I've learned and all the ways in which I've grown in writing a book and make sure that that type of resource is present for students in the student affairs arena. We do have counseling services, we do have student support services, but how do we take that to the next level? What does that look like? How do we tap into students and meet them where they are to ensure that their goal of obtaining a college degree is really tangible, and that the challenges that they have in life, be it socioeconomic, mental illness, or, substance abuse within their family or even within themselves, how do we help them not let those things prevent them from achieving their goal? Those are truly, they're there, and a lot of times in the college, in the higher education arena, we're not thinking about those things. We're waiting for students to come to us and say, hey, I'm really struggling with drinking.
We do that with everybody. So, I mean, but yes, it's very noticeable in the college probably arena where people end up going to those, counseling centers after getting in trouble drinking or doing something wrong. Just like most people go into treatment after getting arrested for something. We're always getting help at the worst moments of our lives, not early on where we say, okay, my life is starting to kind of go off the rails a little bit. Or we're not even just looking at everybody from a preventative lens. Because I can't think of like a bigger transition than to get out of high school and go into college or whatever but then get out of college and go into real life. So those are huge moments.
I totally agree. And I think that is really, what pushes me to want to be in a leadership position in a higher education institution, is to really build that new intuitive mechanism that helps students before they get to that place, and normalizes many of the things that have been stigmatized, like mental health and like mental illness, as much as physical health, and really brings to light the importance of dealing with the traumas that they've had before they got there, because those are the things that impact their ability to matriculate. They impact their ability to manage the stress and the workload of university. A great deal of the work that I've done is in retention services. How do you retain students? How do you keep them? While there is oftentimes this never-ending wheel of new students that you can get, what about the students that you have? How are you ensuring that they're going to be successful? Because some of the things that they're dealing with that is impeding their success has everything to do with something they brought with them. Provide these resources to them before they get there, before they get to that place of a deficit or being in trouble.
You can't just have these assumptions that everybody's got it together just because they made it into college. People don't readily share their mental health issues on their sleeve. They don't wear it wherever they go. They hide it.
It's not only uncomfortable, it's ineffective. One of the things we're learning is that once someone has, spiraled to the point of being hospitalized, now you have to bring them back to a place of normalcy. And that's harder than just keeping them, helping them to establish some balance and homeostasis from the beginning, or helping them to be aware that maybe something that they experienced before they got to the university setting can have a significantly negative impact on their ability to be successful.
If you looked at probably the number of therapists at a counseling center and you looked at the number of students in a counseling or in a college, you would be greatly overwhelmed by that ratio. That ratio would not be good.
We can make some significant change and impact, and that will inevitably change the world, change our country. Once we get to a place of developing a model that really is preventative in nature and interventive in nature for college students regarding, trauma, mental health, mental illness, and we're not being reactive, we really begin to create a different wave of people in our society. because those people then graduate and they come out and they go into the workforce and they have a perspective about mental health and mental illness that is preventative and interventive in nature, and not reactionary. And so how do we begin to change our society so that this stigma is no longer a stigma? Well, this is one of the really great places where we get to start, and so and that then allows for, change in a lot of different places because they go into the workforce, they have children, their children go to school, so it really is a great starting point for destigmatizing mental health and mental illness is really in creating a model that is preventative for college students. So
I went to WVU, West Virginia University, and I grew up in Connecticut. So I completely left my comfort zone and went really far away. And I remember the first semester was rough. Like, not like it was like bad things were happening. It's just like, it was hard to be away from home. Hadn't quite found my place yet. Didn't fully connect with people yet. And then, I don't know, something about the second semester, I felt really connected to people. And, but like if we could get at that earlier, because then you just really start to kind of, that's just such a transitional stressor of finding your place in this unknown land, this, strange world. It's just not the same as high school and go back to your house or whatever and do those things.
That's what my PhD dissertation will be on. How do we take education and take, the necessity that we see in providing education, but transform it into a model where we're looking at how do we help students before they even know they need help?
Right.
And how do we destigmatize things that is going to prevent them from coming to get help when they need it, before they get to a really bad point. And so, yeah, that's where I am, as far as getting a PhD and helping to integrate that model into higher education and just really taking everything that I've experienced and learned and the knowledge I feel like I'm able to help provide in the book and building it out so that students who are, coming to college for the first time or trying to manage, being a mom or being a single mom, being a wife, being a college student, they really need support. So
you're very passionate, and I can see that you have a drive to really change the world. So I appreciate that energy, that transitional age in college and young adulthood and moving on from the nest into this new life where now you're in charge of yourself more so, is definitely a critical period. So to have your efforts to create something like that, I think is great.
Well, thank you too, Doug. This is truly a benefit to people. This podcast is really, really helpful. I've listened to several of the other ones that you all have had. I think my favorite one is on kindness.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that one. It was really great. Yeah, this is such a worthwhile venture. People will really be able to grow and glean from the guests that you've had on and the things that you're talking about. And we will get to see and reimagine what mental health and mental illness looks like in this world.
Well, and I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate you doing your part in supporting our mission and being able to reduce that stigma and educate people on different ways to achieve wellness. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Doug. Take care.